This is Professor Blockchain from Professor Blockchain LLC. In the last chapter of this course, we looked at and defined what is a blockchain, how a blockchain can be used, and the difference between public and private blockchains. Now, since we have come to understand what is micro investing, what is a blockchain, we will look at smart contracts because the three together will allow us not only to micro invest, but also to direct invest, which is even another form of micro investing, but smarter because it'll be direct with another party. So, in order to understand a smart contract, let's look first of all at a general contract, and we'll use the example of John and George, two fictitious individuals who are coming to buy and sell bricks, for example. So John and George want to come into a contract to sell bricks. John wants to buy bricks from George, and George wants to sell those bricks to John. But now they need to determine and negotiate a price, delivery, amount, and they can't do this on their own because they aren't legal experts. So they each hire a lawyer. The lawyer writes up the terms that they think are correct. They both give the contracts to their clients. Their clients look over it, and they say, no, change term X, and the other says, no, change term Y. The lawyers go back, rewrite it, then they all come together, and they sign if they agree upon the contract. So up until now, we've had John and George and their two lawyers. And their lawyers have been making a lot of money because they've been taking the time to write these contracts. Now let's say a month down the road, John and George start to argue over the interpretation of one clause within this contract, and that clause is central because it defines the bricks, the amount, and when they will be exchanged. They can't agree what it actually means. So what do? They call their lawyers. The lawyers get involved, start to argue back and forth. The lawyers can't agree. John and George can't agree. So it needs to go to the next step. In the meantime, both John and George aren't happy because one doesn't have the bricks, one doesn't have the money. And the lawyers are tremendously happy because they're making money off the disagreement. So they take it to a court. Here comes the judge. He looks at both sides. The John and George go and testify. The lawyers present their cases. And the judge could say, okay, John's correct. Or maybe George is correct. Or he could come up with his own interpretation of what the contract says. So now what was originally agreed upon could be something completely different. In essence, John and George could not be dealing with bricks. For all we know, they could be dealing with Play-Doh because the judge says, no, a brick is actually something different. Once again, John and George are out of their deal, and the lawyers have made out tremendously well. All this could be solved in many forms by the use of a smart contract. Now, what is a smart contract? A smart contract is a contract written in code on the blockchain, whereby it goes in if-then format. What does it mean, if-then format? We'll go back to John and George. Let's say in the if-then format, if John receives the bricks, then the money will be transferred over to George. And it's set up automatically, so once one part of the contract is triggered, the second part is automatically fulfilled. So this contract is written, as I said, in code, usually in such languages as Java, Python, C++, or more. If you want to find out more about those languages, I suggest looking into them in different Udemy courses. And it's written by a programmer who takes the instructions, writes them exactly in the code language that they have chosen, and puts it on the blockchain. And since the blockchain is a distributed ledger and its final and immutable, as we discussed. It can't be changed. There is no way for an argument to come about what it actually means. And no party can say, no, I meant this, because that contract is now distributed with different nodes or different places, and thereby everyone knows what the actual terms are. So in this case, as we can see, the smart contract and the blockchain come together to make the transaction between John and George simple and straightforward. And we can use the same things when investing through these blockchains and smart contracts. And we'll talk about that a little more later. This is Professor Blockchain, and if you have any